Hey everybody, it's Ryan, and it's Wednesday. And what I want to do is every single Wednesday, I want to put out just a short little instructional video, also attached with a bunch of information, how you can participate in what we're going to do every week, which is introducing a new spiritual practice or a new spiritual discipline. For some, you may already do these. For others, it may be new for you. And so what I'm going to do is just pick a spiritual discipline every single week, teach about it shortly, and maybe it'd be something you could just try, especially while we're kind of in a forced period of rest. The rhythm's really easy to do these with, and we're kind of unplugged in a way anyways. And so maybe it'd be an easy time just to kind of put some things into practice in your life. And so discipline is really simple. It's just like anything else we're disciplined for. We have a desired outcome, and it is hard work, but the payoff usually is enriching in our life. And so the first spiritual discipline I'm talking about today, I picked the very hardest one, and it's definitely the hardest one for me, is fasting. If you've never fasted before, then get ready. It's an incredible opportunity. It cuts right to the heart of a lot of things, right to the very basic things of like survival, food. If you choose food, you can choose a lot of different other ones. I'm on one right now, which is I just missed my first meal. I'm going to go 24 hours and then I'll have lunch tomorrow. And in that time, I'm taking all these opportunities to kind of grow closer. I have a few things I'm really seeking wisdom on right now in my life. But fasting is a very, very important and biblical practice or discipline that the Bible calls for. And so fasting is super, super, super hard. I've gone all the way from fasting for 7 days of no food, just water. Wow, that's tough. You're beyond hangry. You're just kind of lock you away. Nobody wants to be around you. But it is really an incredible experience that I've had. I've only done that a few times, all the way down to fasting one meal, all for different reasons and purposes in my life. But yeah, I want to encourage you guys, just as you think about what you would fast, maybe even as you hear this video. Fasting has a really rich history biblically, super rich. It is an instruction from God, and I think that it goes almost all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where God says you can have everything else here and all this other fruit, all this other way of living that's connected to me. You can have. There's one thing I want you to say no to, and it was something they didn't say no to, and they went into the distraction instead of reliance on God. That's kind of that first initial God saying, I want you not to choose that. I want you to choose me. But fasting, when it's introduced more formally in the Bible, you'll see it starting with Moses, where he goes up on the mountain. He fasts for 40 days, which seems to be a supernatural work, comes out with the wisdom of the 10 Commandments and then the law. Israel fasts multiple times throughout the scriptures for multiple different reasons. David was an avid faster and wrote about it often in all kinds of stages and phases of his life. Daniel has probably most knownly the modern Daniel fast type of thing, where he fasted certain kinds of food and really focused on a few different kind of dietary food that he would live on. And it was really in fighting the regime that had captured his people, and they wanted to force him to worship and force him to be in a culture that Daniel said, no, we're people of the Lord. So Daniel stood fast with that. Jesus, right? He fasted right out of the gate as soon as he was baptized for a long period of time. Ultimately, his flesh was put to the test that he is ultimately only dependent on God, and in that place to face the hardest temptation of his life with the devil in that encounter. And so the church throughout the New Testament, lots of times where they would call together and fast for discernment, for really ultimately even empowerment. God, where do you want us to go? For wisdom, and then strength to overcome some of the things that they were experiencing. Historically, there's some really cool things you probably don't know about fasting. Maybe you do, but in England, 1588, England called for a full prayer and day of fasting, as they knew that the Spanish armada ships were on their way to invade them. And so so that was what they brought the entire nation to. 1620, the Pilgrims fasted a day before they entered onto the Mayflower to start what they wanted to do, which is a missionary journey. 1756, Britain again calls for fasting, a day of prayer, where they knew that France was in the middle of an invasion towards them, and they called the entire nation together to fast. Lincoln called for a national day of fasting and prayer during the Civil War. Most recently was 1940, September, I think it was like 17th. The king called for a national day of prayer, or not the king, I'm sorry. England called for a national day of prayer and fasting. And so they had heard that Hitler was not long away from starting his invasion of England, and they called everyone together to pray and fast. Churchill actually kind of talked about it. They fasted on a Saturday, and then on Sunday, Churchill said that this was the crux of the battle for Britain, and when that nation became united. Fasting really ultimately is just attentiveness. You're tuning in to something different. You're saying no to something so you can say yes to God. If you could look at it this way, it's a human subtraction for a divine addition. When you think about fasting, there's all kinds of types of fasting. There is fasting food, and it goes right down to the very survival and nourishment that we seek on a daily basis, saying, you know what, I'm going to deny this for now, and I'm going to just look to God for my nourishment, for my soul. There's media. I've done that before, where you're just saying no to something. I have been on a 2-year fast from social media, which I never thought I would do. And so that's been really interesting. I just started using social media last week because of all the distancing that we have. But you can pick that, anything that distracts you, media, watching the news, things like that, hobbies, interests, you name it, you can fast them for a period of time. And I would say ultimately, like, why would God call people to fast? And ultimately, he's calling them to tune into him and put out any distractions that are just the regular rhythms of life, and just choosing to disrupt that rhythm and be in tune with him, to focus for dependence and for kind of a calming peace in your life. Reasons that people have fasted in the Bible, there's probably 5 main ones that I could see, is for clarity and wisdom. God, what do you say about this? And so a nation would be called to fast. An individual would. Grief and ultimately brokenness. Hearts for healing ultimately is what we would say fasting. And then a spiritual dryness, which I know a lot of people and myself have done too, of just, I need to be thirsty for you, God. And Jesus said it really well in Matthew 5:6. He said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." And that's really that kind of denial, and just saying, I need to develop a different thirst, a different appetite for my soul. Turning back from sin is another time you see that, where the nation or people coming to God and saying, God, this is unhealthy how I'm behaving. These are unhealthy vices in my life. I need to turn from that. They are hurting me in my life, and I need health, and I need a proper nutrition for my soul. These things don't work. And then ultimately time for a deeper connection with God. Here I am, Lord, that famous kind of saying of, I'm here, God, I'm in your presence, and I'm focusing only on you and tuning everything out. This is an appetite or a shift really of our food for our soul. That's what fasting ultimately does. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And he wasn't meaning that in a sense of like, oh, this is a cute metaphor. He was saying, your life, real life, is sustained by me. And so fasting kind of puts us in that place physically, so we can kind of sometimes get there spiritually. I love these 2 quotes I read about fasting. You'll be able to taste the difference between true soul nourishment and soul junk food. And You know this, if you've ever fasted sugar or junk food, if you kind of wanted to get that out of your diet, you get kind of a little bit more of a pure, clean, healthy, nutritious feeling in your life. And then when you taste junk food, you're like, oh no, too much sugar. Like I can just feel it right away in my stomach. You can taste the difference, and it helps bring a separation there for you. And then fasting, another thing said, fasting clears us out and opens us up to intentionally seeking God's will and grace in a way that goes beyond normal habits of worship and prayer. It's like a adrenaline shot to worship and prayer. It puts us right at a place of all distractions tuned out, and we're focusing on God. So this week, I want you to just take this next 7 days, pick a day, pick an opportunity that you can fast, or something that you feel like, okay, I want to just put that down for now. So for me, it was, 24-hour lunch to lunch, right? That might be something that you do. Pick a meal. You can just do one meal. You can pick no media, or just no social media, or just no news right now. Whatever, you name it, you can pick it, where you're saying no and you're saying yes to God, and spending the time that you would have spent with God. So if it's social media for some of you, that could be 8 hours. I'm judging. That could be 8 hours that you could just spend with God, and maybe that'll tell you how much you're on social media if it's hard to spend that time with God. So attached to this video is some instructions, some really basic things, a document, which would be helpful guidelines for food fasting. That's important. Some warnings, some things to be careful of, that will maybe help you if you should do a food fast. Suggestions on what you should do with the time during your fast, some reflection questions you can ask during your fasting, and some spiritual exercises during the fast. So I hope this is helpful. I look forward to hearing any stories or things that God does in your life during that season, or things that you realize about yourself. So I will see you guys next week with a new spiritual discipline.